On October 24th, 2024, the Earth's biomes demand answers from humanity. Nature has suffered enough from deforestation, pollution, and exploitation. What will humanity do now to restore balance?
Do you promise to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes. You may begin. Okay.
We want to begin this by talking about how deserts are one of the most undervalued and least talked about biomes on the planet. We believe that ignorance promotes indifference, and when we become ignorant to these situations, we are allowing human activity to destroy our planet. At what point are you satisfied, and do you see a limit to what humans need? And do you think it is okay to take from the species that have adapted and need the resources in this biome?
So I think there was two parts of that question. The first one being, why is the desert unappreciated? But then you contradict yourself saying, why are we taking resources from them? If they were unappreciated, we wouldn't be taking resources from the desert. But as well as, if we're taking resources, we're also trying to replenish that with different organizations, not necessarily replanting, but making sure that there isn't a abundance being taken away to wipe out a whole species itself.
Okay. One significant issue occurring in deserts because of human activities is desertification. Do you have any specific actions teams are taking to improve desertification? How efficient are they, and are they attainable? Like cost and resources used to replenish the deserts?
I think desertification is a big problem that's going on that humans are contributing to. It's really common in, I'd say, California and the southern parts of California with more droughts occurring. But I believe that's also part of the way that the earth has come to be. The earth is ever changing. Places are becoming more dry, but there's also places, even in the desert itself, that are becoming more replenished. Just a few weeks ago, there was a flood and a rain in the desert that's causing more species to grow through the water sources and channels that the home earth is creating for itself. So for desertification to happen, it's like one thing's bad, but another thing better is coming.
Okay. So with harm to the deserts, some species are having to move, and these species have grown and adapted to these conditions. Why is it okay for us to disregard animals and 17% of the human populations that are native to this desert biome for the benefit of humans otherwhere?
So it was only 17%. I would also like to say we are not just taking 17% of species from the desert. We are also taking, I won't say it's a bad thing, but it's about survival at the end of the day. We're all doing something to benefit ourselves, but not necessarily that, but be able to make sure that everyone else is thriving as well. Not just seen in the desert, we're also farming, agriculture itself, so not just plants, but animals too, for food for us to survive. But 17%, I wouldn't say is a lot, but
1.3 billion.
What was that?
1.3 billion.
Explain.
People.
What about those people?
Okay.
No, 1.3 billion people what?
That's people who are living.
Who are living in the desert.
This is very serious, your saying, but I would just like to add, how can we really blame the people as a whole? How are we going to blame society as a whole when these things are really coming from big corporations? It's not other people disregarding people. It's the big guys. So why are all of us to be blamed, and I feel like we can't steer into that direction, you know?
I don't think we're blaming all people. I think we're blaming people who are supporting this human activity and the earth, like damaging the earth. It's not every person, it's people who are supporting like destruction to these places.
Overruled. Could you clarify which resources are being depleted?
There's minerals and natural gases that are in the desert biomes that are probable and people need to take those.
But there's also different organizations that help toward preventing these things from happening. The Center for Biological Diversity has groups and organizations set up for funding and people going out to these deserts itself for replanting and replenishing these areas.
Okay, that's cool, but I think like one of the biggest like consequences is when people take the desert biome, it's like it takes like years and years to replenish all the things, the resources that are being taken. So
Prosecution,
like
you have
a
one more
forward-
question. Yeah, one more question.
Okay, so do you consider yourself an invasive species?
Humans?
Yes. By definition, an invasive species is a new or introduced species to an environment that harms the environment.
So do I think I'm harming the environment?
Yes, it's human activity.
I would say no. I do not believe I'm an invasive species.
Well, if there's research showing that you are causing harm to this environment, why don't you think you're an invasive species by definition? Do you think what you're defending is an invasive species?
Well, invasive species are also species that will only do harm. We can look in Florida. There are, I believe it's a type of lizard. They only take from the environment but don't give back. They'll take from the environment, exterminating different species, but they're not providing anything to that environment except for harm. I think as humans, we are taken away from the environment, but we also bring up these organizations that help bring back to the environment, which is different from an invasive species, which only taken away and is a negative impact.
Cool. Okay. So I would just like to go back to the invasive species argument. By that logic, how can we call humans an invasive species when we are actively making efforts to conserve these biomes as well, especially in the desert? Because we have organizations, even the United Nations, that are actively working on preserving. So when you call humans as a whole an invasive species, I feel like that's very oversimplified on the part of humans, because we are actively contributing good. Oh, okay.
You are addressing the defendant.
Okay, my bad.
Yes.
Okay, got you. So, what are humans actively doing that are contributing?
So like I said, for the international biological diversity, they create organizations to replenish the deserts. And that's like, deserts aren't just sand and dunes. They have species like plants, different types of cattle and animals. So it's just making sure that these different organisms and species are thriving and continuing to thrive.
Would you clarify your sources?
Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, you don't have your research out, sir.
It's on top of my head.
Yes, okay, of course. While he's getting that up, I would like to ask you, do you think it's unreasonable for humans to go to the desert to get resources? Is that something you think is unreasonable or justified?
I think it's justified. There's an abundance of a desert. I'd say 20% of Africa and even parts of the United States is desert. So we need to be able to take these opportunities to grab resources from places that aren't being taken away from, but also like making sure that we're putting back to them.
You said it was 20% of the United States?
No,
or
I said 20%
of the desert?
of Africa.
Okay.
Yes.
Where is that source?
It's just, I'm thinking of a map. The bottom part. Oh, 33% of the world? Okay, so 33% of the world is desert. Yes.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
So do you think that the resources that are found in the desert are essential to our day-to-day life as humans?
I believe so. Well, it's not necessarily for the day-to-day life, but it allows us to thrive every single day. Like, we'll take something one day, but it doesn't allow us to thrive that next day or that same day. It'll, like, for example, one big one is oil rigging. It is a harsh issue, but oil rigging does allow for economic development in said countries. So I think that helps the country thrive as a whole.
You may ask more questions.
Okay. Do you think humans are the sole reason that the desert is experiencing desertification, or do you think there are other factors, like natural factors, that we're not talking about?
Like I said before, I don't believe that it's just humans that are contributing to desertification. It's just the way that life happens in the earth is changing. I said it earlier and I'll say it again. A few weeks ago there was a rain and a flood in the desert, and it's changing the overall patterns of the weather itself.
Yes.
Yes, we checked.
Okay.
About what?
Can we see the reasons why that flood happened and what could have caused that? Like, could that have been caused by climate change, which is caused by humans?
Objection sustained.
I don't have that research on me at the moment. But do you have that research in your hand if you're objecting to it?
I would argue that the defendant does not have sufficient research.
But there were floods and rains in the desert,
Caused by what?
which I am not. I currently do not hold that information. The news. It is true. It is true. We're good. Thank you. Is that it?
The fence rests. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
You may begin.
We are here to defend the temperate rainforest from humans who have decided to go against our nature, take advantage of their natural resources, and harm the wildlife there.
According to the United States Department of Agriculture, humans have converted the forest to agriculture and urban uses, exploited species, fragmented wildlands, changed the demographic structure of forests, altered habitat, degraded the environment with atmospheric and soil pollutants, introduced exotic pests and competitors, and domesticated favorite species.
So our first question is, are you aware of the fact that not only are you taking away homes from animals, but also from indigenous people? According to the Better Planet Education Organization, indigenous people's way of life has gone uninterrupted, but is now under threat because of invasion of rainforest by outsiders.
Well, first of all, the human population is everywhere. We're over 8 billion people, and everyone needs homes to live. And we need businesses to conduct and houses everywhere. So. And there's areas set aside, like legally protected areas, that we're not allowed to take trees down where those animals can be moved.
So you would prefer to put money over people's lives?
A lot.
to object to that. As in recent years, the U.S. government's budget allocated for climate resources, including stuff regarding habitats in the temperate forest and supporting those communities, has increased by billions in recent years. So I would say we're putting money over people. We're putting more money into people.
Objection sustained. Prosecution, you may continue.
Okay, though that is true, why are people still getting taken out of their homes even though they were there first for over 23,000 years?
You're talking about indigenous people?
Yes.
I don't have the answer to that. You're working on it. We're working on that answer.
Okay, and who is working on it? Who is producing these conservation efforts?
Everyone.
Okay, I would like to go back to the point. I would like to go back to what you just said. Okay, you said they haven't been quite effective quite yet. That it's only being threatened, and how we are actively trying to keep that from happening. There's more resources being put into climate. So how can we be worried about this potential threat when we're only getting better as a society and our government is only contributing more?
Okay, but what kind of contributions have been made over the past few years besides just, kicking them out?
There's organizations set up to help them.
What organizations?
I will have order in my court. Do not argue over each other. Objection is overruled.
Oh.
Prosecution, you may continue asking questions.
Okay. Did you know that the destruction of the rainforest causes habitat loss, leading species to move out of the rainforest and causing the imbalance of local populations? How are you going to fix the issue to create new habitats for animals and make sure that the imbalance of the population is solved?
Once again, there's legally protected areas where those animals are moved to. It's the same type of rainforest, it's just in a different location where they move to.
What are you going to do to fix the issue that has already occurred, like the imbalance of
It's
populations?
getting better, as she already said. We've put more money aside to help that.
Moving animals out of their habitat is not a very smart idea because they lived there first and they've been living there for thousands of years, and moving them can also cause a decline in their species and just cause a whole overall just harmful effect.
It's not moving them out of their habitat, it's just moving them to a different place in their habitat. It's still the temperate rainforest.
According to the National Geographic, the wood that you have cut down to turn into timber, what do you do with it?
You want a home to live in, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
You want buildings for businesses to conduct their business, right?
Defendant.
I would like to go back to that. For these corporations, are they making any conservation efforts to these temperate rainforests because of their, cutting down all the timber and, taking away from the temperate rainforests and their habitats?
Yes, there's organizations set up, and the U.S. has set aside more money to help get conservation efforts.
Which organizations are set up?
Yes.
Native Government Center, American Indian, or Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, Survival. The list goes on.
And what about the species?
I don't know the exact organizations, but there's definitely organizations.
Another question is, are you accountable to take responsibility for the extinction of many species? For example, about 20% of animals are lost every year. We have these animals like jaguars and the golden lion tambourine, the top two animals going extinct in the rainforest. Although there are many more, the damage that you have created is far too deep. Will you take accountability for the poaching, overhunting, destroying their habitats, and polluting their homes, according to the American Museum of Natural History?
So in the past century, we have definitely done some bad things, but now scientists are working on overturning those effects before they become irreversible.
How fast are these effects going to be made?
They're already in place, such as organizations.
When will we begin seeing the effects?
You do see the effects
Evident in what?
in society, environment.
Can you give an example?
No.
Start asking. All right. So do you think that the materials that humans are getting is worth the impact we're putting in?
Yes, because we're an ever-growing society who is getting smarter with the new technology that we can possess from getting these materials.
All right. Do you believe that the tropical rainforests, forests are well protected by both the government and individual organizations?
Yes, there are legally protected areas that we can't do anything in that are set aside to just the animals.
All right. And do you think that the impacts being made on the forest is an everybody issue or a big business issue? Like, do you think the average human has something to contribute to the impact of the forests?
No, I don't think it's the average human who messes up the forest. I think it's big corporations who are sometimes greedy, but now there are more and more regulations set in place to make sure that they can't do those bad things.
And do you think that the effects that humans can be reversible with technology as we're going into an age that we have more access to technology?
Yes, there's definitely a way to overturn these effects. As long as they're not basically extinct, then there's ways that they can repopulate.
All right, I think that's all my questions.
Will you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I also do.
Awesome. You may begin.
I would like to start off with how can you explain the 62% of North American grasslands biome has been lost?
I would say that obviously in the U.S. specifically, there is a lot of urbanization. I'm not going to deny that, but I wouldn't say that the grasslands are still not being utilized because we still do have resources and species that are protected under certain laws, such as the Endangered Species Act. And we do have reserve lands and national parks that are still open and supporting the environment and the different organisms that are living there.
So I do agree with that you guys have protection agencies across Africa, but if those protection agencies actually worked, we wouldn't have poaching. Specifically rhinoceros poaching, where millions of rhinos are killed each year. Exhibit A. And specifically with rhinos, multiple species have gone endangered, including the white rhinoceros, which One of them was killed within a zoo. And how are we supposed to protect millions of miles of land when you can't protect a zoo within the U.S.?
How was it? Can you tell me the story about that?
So basically, a guy went into a zoo and shot and killed a white rhinoceros for its horn, which contains, oh no, my computer just died. Which then shot and killed this rhino and took its horn, and then before anyone could do anything, it was already dead, and it was the last male of its kind.
I would like to object on the basis that this is irrelevant. This has nothing to do with what was just brought up.
Objection overruled.
I would like to say that it was because it was brought up for endangered species. We're bringing up species that haven't been protected within the grasslands.
I agree, that's not okay, but that is a zoo and not the actual environment of the grasslands.
I was giving you an example. Like, I'm giving an example of how you're supposed to protect millions of miles of land if you can't protect a zoo.
Okay. I don't have the answer to that right now.
Could you rephrase your question?
Well, originally it started off with how do you explain the loss of, specifically around the world, 80% of grasslands, including 99% of tall grass prairies.
I feel like I elaborated on that in my previous statement where I was discussing, I know I was specifically geared towards the U.S. and national parks and stuff, so that's where my answer was thinking towards, and how we do have acts in place that do protect certain lands. It's not as if all grasslands are being occupied.
Defendant, what security is being placed around those protected areas?
Well, I mentioned we have the Endangered Species Act, as well as, for example, in North Dakota, we have about 40,000 acres of grasslands that they went to court. 4 different counties in North Dakota went to court because they weren't happy with the fact that the land was not being used for urbanization, and they were encouraging construction in those areas, and environmentalists obviously clearly opposed and believed that it would inhibit wilderness survival and growth. So the Court of Appeals in North Dakota upheld that decision to keep those grasslands worthless. So that is an example.
So we actually have a statistic from South Dakota State University with a picture that says excessive and continuous grazing, increased percentages of bare ground leading to increased wind erosion and water runoff. Furthermore, with all farming land, it can pick up large amounts of harmful chemicals and pesticides that can flow into our watersheds.
Exhibit B, the picture. There are collaborative efforts in multiple states that are, such as Arkansas, Virginia, such as Manassas National Battlefield Park, Chickasaw National Recreation Area in Oklahoma, and Horseshoe Bend National Military Park in Alabama that are working on techniques to restore these grasslands, such as controlled burns to remove invasive species, selective use of certain herbicides, and cutting and removing trees and shrubs that are overgrown and harming the environment. So there are efforts being placed in order to restore these grasslands.
Prosecution, you have one remaining question. It must be asked within 1 minute.
How do you explain the loss of really important pollinators and animals in our grasslands, like bees, for example? I don't know the exact explanation. I just know that there are programs working to fix that. I know we have, for example, like farming
obviously we need pollinators. There are bills such as the Farm Bill. It's a critical opportunity for grasslands for us to support and invest in enhancing that wildlife growth. And Title II in that Farm Bill helps farmers implement natural resource conservation efforts in order to help sustain these crops and these organisms such as bees that are helping their plants grow.
Are you guys doing anything for the parasites and pests that have been the most common stressors among honeybee colonies?
Going back to what I said about the collaboration with certain national parks, there are selective uses of certain herbicides in order to fix this issue.
Do you have a source of one?
I don't have the exact source. It's based on the national website, and it's just like I said, the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, MP Ridge National Military Park, and Manassas National Battlefield Park are taking these different techniques and using them to support their organisms.
Do you think that humans are making impactful efforts to preserve these grasslands?
I believe so, because if we weren't, we wouldn't have these acts going in place. There's still a clear effort that these are occurring.
All right, and do you think that the average person would agree with the unnecessary hunting of animals in this biome? Do you think the average person would think that's okay?
I don't think the average person would agree with this. Obviously, in any environment, it's not okay.
Objection. I believe that if people knew, that it's not a good thing, but the worth of ivory, which is the main ingredient within elephants and rhinos' horns, is worth more in gold, more its weight than gold, and money corrupts people. So how are you supposed to make that total estimation off of people? Like, if you just come up to someone and be like, how do you feel about rhinos being killed? They're obviously going to be like, oh no. But if there's a money value to it, people are pretty corrupt overall and do a lot for money.
Objection sustained.
Do you think that the amount of people rallying behind these acts is enough to prove that there are people who are still concerned about these biomes?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, with the rhino problems, unfortunately, we have seen a lot of influence, and we're all on social media. It's not unapparent. There are still people that are concerned, because if people weren't concerned, we wouldn't still be hearing about this. So there are efforts in place.
All right, I think that's
Good morning. I would ask you to raise your right hand. Do you swear to say the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good. Prosecution, you may begin.
I want to start by explaining the significance of the tundra biome to the jury. It contains many habitats for wildlife and special vegetation that can only grow in the tundra because of its adaptations. And it acts as a carbon sink, which means it absorbs more carbon than it releases, fighting against climate change, which is the tundra's biggest threat. What activities have you conducted that harms the tundra?
The activities that we've been doing, that it really must suck for the animals, because we need all the oil we can get from the oil drilling, But to fix that, we have significantly reduced the amount of oil drilling, and we have put some restrictions to it. And then we also need some pipelines. I ain't gonna lie, I don't know what we're doing to fix that.
I would like to add on to what my client is saying, that while we do have business over there, yes.
Do you have an objection? No. No.
Okay.
You said there was restrictions. Can you name them?
Oh no. See, well, nah, I can't. Yeah, we're working on it though. Yeah, facts.
Okay.
Facts.
Well, can you explain how your activities? Can you explain how your activities are affecting the biome?
Our activities are harming the biome because the permafrost time. We're damaging the soil. But yeah, that's the.
Okay, well, I'm going to explain for you. So the pipeline and heavy vehicles, which you mentioned earlier, they damage soil, preventing vegetation growth. And the well drilling, it prevents, or it allows permafrost. Do you know what permafrost is? Okay. By definition, it is ground that remains below 0 degrees Celsius for 2 or more years, and it is capable of holding organic matter and reduces carbon emissions. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems pretty important to me.
Prosecution, do you have a question to add to that?
Do you know how human activities have affected the actual temperature of the Arctic and how fast it is to warm compared to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I'm well aware that the temperatures are rising, yeah, but we're working on it though. I don't know how we're working on it, but we're working on it, Lawyers can cook up not a whole lot.
The Arctic is warming 4 times faster compared to the rest of the planet, causing melting sea ice along with melting permafrost. Melting sea ice leads to rising sea levels, which puts people living up there like Greenland and indigenous people in Canada at risk of flooding. How do you plan to prevent that or combat that?
Oh, to prevent it. How do we do that? Oh, thanks. So, to prevent that, we're actually establishing protected areas, yeah. That's all I got, though.
Melting sea ice has exposed the seafloor, which is full of precious minerals and ores, and has caused mining to be present there. And it also leads to the increase of black carbon. Do you know what that is and the effect they will have on the humans and the ice? Black carbon. So black.
How are you attempting to restore and preserve the biome in which you are effectively degrading, if anything?
We don't, but in all seriousness though, I think we're trying to switch away from fossil fuels, use more of that hydropower stuff, I think that's what it's called. And the solar panels, right. And yes, that's.
Does that show any improvement? Because according to NASA, current warming is 10 times faster than the average rate after an ice age and is continuing to rise. Since 1990 or 1980, I have a graph. You guys can't see it from there, but since from 1940 to 1980, for 40 years, it has continued to remain in a general area, but since ever after 1990, it's been continuing to rise and it's completely spiked.
Looks false to me, I'm not gonna lie.
Well, that's NASA's graph, so. There needs to be immediate action, and carbon that is being produced as we speak, it will continue to linger in the atmosphere for around 300 to 1,000 years. So until you take action now, it's just going to keep growing and it's going to stay in the atmosphere.
Is there a question?
No.
I would like to object. I'd like to say that there is being action taken for environmental. Also, that's not a question.
What's the action being taken?
Various organizations and the government are actively working and putting money into environmental funding, like I mentioned earlier.
I'm not sure if I already asked you this. Can you name any organizations that are contributing to the...
Yeah, obviously we got the the AFC, you know, it actually stands for the Arctic Fixing Association. So yeah, that's the only one I can name them.
Does the prosecution rest? Does the prosecution rest?
That's a good one.
Yeah. The defendant be cross-examined. Okay, cool. Oh, yes. Yes. Sure.
Do you think that humans are making significant strides to fix our problems in the tundra?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you know, no, we doing a lot of stuff like, no, we working on it though.
Okay, do you think major oil companies pulling out of the Arctic is significant to our cause in helping the planet or helping the planet?
Wait, I have a question.
Wait. Question. Would you like me to? Do you need clarification?
Yeah. You gotta dumb it down a little bit.
Okay. So big bad oil companies in the Arctic, leaving the Arctic, is that good?
Bro, I don't understand the words that she's saying. I'm not that intelligent.
Is oil companies leaving the Arctic good for humans and the environment?
Oh yeah, no, of course it's good for the environment though, you know? Yeah.
Good morning. Welcome to the stand. May I ask you to raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and you? And nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. You may begin.
Okay. So I want to start with how shrublands are created. One main creation of the shrublands are wildfires, which are actively being suppressed by human intervention as in wildfires and stuff like that. How are you going to be able to protect these shrublands and allow these wildfires to happen, but also protect the other habitats around them?
Can you repeat the first part? You said the shrublands are created from wildfires?
Yes, so the burning down of some habitats allow for those shrublands to sprout up, because shrublands only last around 30 years because they're like a precursor to a forest. So they come from the burning down or the, how to say it? The non-development of a habitat in that area already allows for the shrublands to sprout up. So when a habitat is burnt down, that allows for this habitat to be created and allows for these species to live in this habitat and grow.
Is there a question?
Yes, the previous question still stands. How are you going to be able to sustain both the shrubland habitat while allowing these other habitats to, not burn down?
So that's a really good point. I believe that fires are the number one problem in the shrublands area. But because of this, there's so many organizations that are already in place. Like, for example, the Environmental Defense Fund, as well as the Shrubland Tree Hugger. Both these organizations help provide money to keep these areas afloat and help sustain them.
How are they sustaining them? What actions are they using?
Well, so like you said earlier, the fires are the ones that are burning them down. And there's no doubt about it, that is caused by climate change. But what humans are doing in defense to that is making sure that these areas are being kept orientated and being kept up so that these fires aren't occurring from either climate change with the heat or from its cigarette butts that are left behind by the humans. So they're being kept up in the area.
I think I must have been unclear. The wildfires are necessary to create shrubland. You have to have the wildfires for the other habitats to burn down to create the shrublands. So wildfire prevention is what's causing shrublands not to be created and causing these species not to have homes, the fauna not to be apparent in the environment.
Well, there's still fires happening because, like, the fires aren't going to stop because climate change is occurring naturally.
Yes.
And
I'm saying that human intervention in preventing these wildfires from growing, which is natural in some cases. Some of them are unnatural, and I understand that. But wildfires in some cases are natural and allow these shrublands to grow. How are you going to sustain that wildfire from happening but not allowing other habitats to completely burn out?
I would like to object. I feel like this is not solely on the issue of the humans. This is also an issue of how processes happen naturally. It's too much, I feel like, to ask of the defendant.
Objection sustained. You may continue with a different question.
Okay, we're gonna move on from that. Buildings and roads being built on top of shrublands can cause irreversible damage and fragment existing shrubland communities. Humans are putting these infrastructural burdens onto the chaparral habitats knowingly. What's being done on your end to protect the habitats?
Can you repeat that?
Essentially, roads are being built on top of the shrublands. Are you going to keep doing that? What are humans doing to protect the habitat?
Well, I think infrastructure and road building is a necessary part of life. They're found everywhere in the United States. It's how we get around transportation. It's how we get to a job. It's how we get to a school. So it's important to cut these, to make exceptions in these areas for us as a human population to thrive in our own cities. But I think where the roads are most common is in California, Southern California specifically. There's a lot of shrubland in there. This past summer I was there, and you look to your left and you look to your right, San Diego specifically. There were shrubs all over the mountains and shrubs literally everywhere that you went. But what there weren't as many of, as I'd say, in this case, what you were saying with roads, I think roads would help better the transportation and traffic that are being built in these big cities. So it helps benefit the human population.
In addition, these roads are causing the mortality rate of certain species living in these shrublands to increase. For example, I have a photo. White-tailed deer are a...
May I have it?
Yes. Scroll down a little bit. There's two photos. But white-tailed deer are a natural habitat of shrublands and are being hit by cars on the road, and it's increasing the mortality rate of these species. How are you preventing that specifically?
So there's already you can't stop a species from heading into the middle of the road and being hit. So what we do is we set signs in place. Like you can go down the street and you'll see a duck sign or you'll see a deer sign by Steffi Lake. It's really important that we make the people aware that there are animals in these areas, and so that they aren't being hurt by ourselves. So there's nothing that we can do to help the animals, but we can only help them by educating ourselves, which is by making these signs, warning the people to be safe and be careful.
Couldn't you also help them by allowing relocation for the animals, but also relocating the roads so that they're in a less dangerous area for these species?
Well, like I said earlier, these roads are very important for city life and city transportation, but you say relocation, so you want us to move a native species from their shrubland to a different area?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, couldn't you allow for the roads to be in a safer place? Do your homework on how the species actually navigate that area. Don't put it in the middle of an area so that the species can't go to the other side, so that they have to go through a human infrastructure.
I would like to object because shrublands, as you mentioned earlier, shrublands are a product of wildfires, right? So shrublands can really pop out just about anywhere where you find those appearance. So we can't pre-anticipate that. We're not able to pre-anticipate that. That's why I think that's an unfair question to ask the defense.
You also said that earlier, shrublands take, 30 years to develop, and into its like full-grown self.
Yeah, yes.
So I don't think it was not even 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, there was a huge wildfire in California and a wildfire, I believe, in Canada or something. And it brought down all that smoke from that area to Virginia Beach. This happened about 4 years ago. So it's not about necessarily putting the fires out to protect the shrubland, it's also to protect ourselves as well. Because if we didn't do that, there'd be an influx of smoke, and those burning areas could like spread to cities, which we don't want, because that's where the mass population is.
Moving on. Invasive and problematic species compete with native fauna, overutilize native species, and cause habitat damage. What steps can humans take to reduce the impact of invasive species on chaparral habitats?
So there's continuously efforts to remove invasive species. This is found on treehugger.com. It is an actual organization. It's also part of the Environmental Defense Fund. But these invasive species, they're being removed through what there is. Right now there is a lack of poor forest management, and that's also causing to these wildfires that are happening. But with this poor forest management, there isn't enough regulation to remove these invasive species. So that is one of the things that the Environmental Defense Fund is trying to do, which is trying to uplift the poor forest management to remove these invasive species and clean up the area itself.
Additionally, agricultural practices, specifically mostly livestock grazing, can adversely affect chaparral habitats through loss of plant cover, erosion, and conversion to non-native species. So with that being said, how do you think this could affect the development of the habitat or the early decline in the habitat? Or how could it in turn affect the other wildlife living in these habitats?
Erosion? Well, I believe that it's not just livestock grazing, it's the way that the shrublands are created itself. Like you said, wildfires, those are also contributing to the decrease in the amount of animals that are in the area.
So what's being done about it?
What's being done about livestock grazing?
About like the decrease, the decline in the habitat.
The decline in the habitat. Well, the decline in the habitat is part of that is because of infrastructure, but another part of that is because of the wildfires. These wildfires are burning the areas and they're depleting everything that's in its path until it's just coal and char on the ground.
The prosecution has one remaining question.
Humans are trying to stop those fires.
Must be asked quickly. It must be turned over to cross.
Sorry. Going back to infrastructure, because we've been talking about wildfires a lot, going back to infrastructure being built on top of the shrublands, buildings or power lines are being created, which are introducing new sorts of predators to the area, such as hawks that tend to build nests and prey from the top of these power lines. And we're killing, let me see, where is that? Sorry. Specifically, where is it? The New England cottontail, that is a native species of shrubland in the New England area of the United States. These hawks are coming to the area and preying on them. How are you going to prevent new predators being introduced from the area due to the infrastructure that you are building?
Well, like I said, it's before. It's about this is also happening because of poor forest management. With these infrastructures being built, I think the government needs to be held accountable for what's happening with these new invasive species coming into play. But it also isn't just these hawks that are, I'd say, depleting the other inhabitants of the ecosystem, but it's also the predators that are in them itself. One of the biggest dangers in these areas are mountain lions. They're roaming around freely, and there's really no apex predator that are taking them down because they are the top.
I turn the case over to the opposing counsel.
Okay. So, do you think that the efforts of various institutes to acquire these shrublands is an effective way to deal with forest mismanagement?
Definitely. I think the biggest one, like I've been talking about this whole time, is wildfires. If you remove humans from these areas, the situation isn't going to get better. Nothing's going to be putting out these fires, and humans are going to keep doing what they're doing, and which is going to increase climate change. And without the humans in place, climate change can't go back to how it's been before, at a faster rate. That's it.
And do you think it's fair to accuse humans of actively destroying these shrublands when trying to put out these fires? Do you think it's okay for them to put out these fires?
I don't think it's fair to say that we're trying to destroy the shrublands by putting out these fires, because at the same time we're trying to help these animals that are in the ecosystem, and as well help ourselves from being hurt by the fires too.
And do you think if these wildfires extend beyond the shrublands, it could have impacts on other ecosystems as well?
Definitely. Like I said before, if they...
Objection. That's irrelevant to the current debate. We are talking about the shrubland ecosystem right now.
Objection sustained.
Thank you.
Okay. You're under oath. You may begin.
So we want to start with deforestation. So how do you justify the economic benefits of your activities, logging and clear cutting, against the environmental damage caused by the taiga biome?
You want a house to live in, right?
But we're representing like the biome, not the humans. So,
That's not really answering our question.
We need to cut down the forest if you want all this infrastructure.
So, your deforestation of the biome increases risk of soil erosion and flooding. What measures have you taken to prevent soil erosion and degradation in the areas you operate within the taiga?
So the trees that are being struck, there are organizations that help restore that, such as Trees for the Future and Tree Aid.
Okay, but the regrowth process is about 20 to 30 years. How can you ensure that the biome is able to be regenerated?
It's just going to take a little bit of time.
what if we run out of like resources before?
I'm sure scientists will be able to stop that within the next few years.
How would they stop that?
We're looking into that.
And then real quick, we want to move on to our species. So humans have the ability to produce faux fur and leather, so why hunt our foxes, bears, moose, etc. for it?
That process has been lowered throughout the years now that we have these artificial materials.
But people still illegally do it anyways, and it's affecting our food chains and our organisms.
But it's becoming decreased throughout time, and I'm sure over time it can stop.
You're sure?
I can't really ensure that, but I know that there are artificial materials that can stop that. There's no point doing it rather than like for fun.
Prosecution must rest. You are excused. Cross-examination may begin.
All right. Do you think that humans' need for resources in such an abundant area is justified? Do you think that our need for materials and our use of those materials is justified in such an abundant area?
Yes, because the taiga is the most abundant biome. It covers 33% of the earth. So I'm sure if we take a little bit, it won't affect it.
And Would you agree that recent conservation efforts for both the plants and animals in the taiga have been impactful?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And
You're excused. You're under oath. You may begin.
do you have a plan to replant the trees in the forest that are being cut down?
Yes. Oh, okay. So we have the Tropical Forest Conservation Act. It was enacted in 1998 to offer developing countries, which happens to be where most tropical rainforests are present, such as Costa Rica is one of the prime examples, and it supports tropical forest conservation activities, and it's and we have other acts such as the Forest Act, and Amazon 21 is one that is quite popular and invests in programs to help those developing countries lower greenhouse gas emissions and save those carbon sinks that allow us to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions in the atmosphere, and it allows for replanting of trees to occur, because we know that we can't deny that it's a problem, but we also can't say that there isn't effort being placed into ensuring that these biomes are being replanted and restored.
With those efforts that you talk about, how will you keep the environment sustained while said trees are growing and you're taking care of it? Because it's been reported that it takes about 20 years for a tree to grow. So how are you going to keep the Amazon rainforest, or how are you going to keep any rainforest sustained while you're cutting down about 20% of all the trees? How are you going to keep the environment together?
We have the Deforestation Procurement Act, and that avoids unsustainable practices while these trees are growing. And we also are working on utilizing money that governments are giving in certain countries to uphold these growths that are happening, because yes, it takes a while to grow, but we have to continue planting, and we just kind of wait it out while these trees grow, but we're not stopping planting. We're taking time and covering these areas as we go and ensuring that it's a process that is able to keep moving.
Okay, so outside of the Amazon rainforest, do you know exactly how much destruction of tropical rainforest has occurred?
I don't have the exact.
So for that, since pre-industrial times, tropical rainforest has been subjected to deforestation for resources, and since then, 64% of tropical rainforests have been destroyed, and with only roughly 35% of that land being protected, how long do you plan on continuing to take from such a vast yet fragile biome?
Obviously, we depend on these natural resources, but we are using other activities and different methods, such as agroforestry, to sustain these different environments. And agroforestry is where we have integration of different trees and shrubs in different systems to not only support the plants and trees, but also it helps support the different animals.
Defendant, I'm going to pass it to cross-examination. You have one question.
Okay, so do you think that with all the new developments and advancements in both technology to plant these trees and efforts to protect these trees, that 20-year gap is enough with all the abundance and access that we have to these trees?
Yes.
All right, so that's my question. All right, we're good.
You are dismissed. For the grasslands, they are found. Who's standing? Grasslands was found not guilty. For the tropical rainforest, they were found not guilty. The taiga was found guilty. The desert was found guilty. The temperate rainforest was found guilty. The shrubland was found not guilty. The tundra was was found very guilty. Thank you. You are excused.